Hello everyone, and welcome to something, not a horror, well, maybe a horror, cosmic horror. I tried a couple jump scary ones and just sort of got a little bit let down by the ones. Kind of let down, not really let down, just not let up. Kind of left in the same place I started, somewhere in the middle. Anyway, now this is a lot more up my street. This is not, as far as I understand, it's not a horror in the sense of scare your pants off horror. It's a cosmic horror. It's H.P. Lovecraft. It's, I think it's going to be good. Dagon. Options good. Everything good. No blue screen. No, not blue screen. Motion blur. Let's just leave that as it is. Other. Don't need controller. Should be fine. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Alright, let's do it. Starting a new game, yes. I mean, maybe I tried to play this once upon a time, but I don't remember it at all. Dagon is a faithful, interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work, focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequence or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
Okay, during the game you will encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey, others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background and the author. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the Elder Sign. Okie dokie.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Then do it. Or don't. Oh, okay, I have to click. Sorry, never mind.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War and World War I. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Friedrich Serturner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium, after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse known as soldier's disease already posed a big problem in the United States. Yeah, we'll read it.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Some time ago, impressed by my entire uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet or piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. Letters to Reinhard Kleiner, H.P. Lovecraft. Even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence, the life and times of H.P. Lovecraft.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on the 27th of July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. No prisoners will not be taken. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns, under their king Attila, made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention of 1899.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Okay.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know. For my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
As far as the legend goes, these encounters that we hear about in Lovecraft's work were his own, or at least, like, whether or not it's been actually revealed to be true, I'm not sure. But as far as people believe or suspect, he was a bit of a mystic. And his own inquiry into the nature of consciousness took him inward, exploring the inner dimensions of consciousness, whether it was through substances or kind of meditative means took him to places like this, and he had these visions of these other worlds regularly in his dreams.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime, yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
We call this, cosmic horror, it's referred to, and the idea behind it, it doesn't resonate with a lot of people, but, I often, not so much anymore, occasionally, but more so in the past, used to reflect on the perspectives of reality from other creatures' points of view. We look at the world as human beings, and many of us seem to think that that's the complete picture. What we think is what is real and what is true, and yet you can look at this planet alone and kind of try to gain an insight into the perspective of reality from an animal's point of view, a dog, a tiger, a sea creature, a whale, given that they can sense things that we can't. And it's not a giant leap of the imagination, or also a far stretch of even just the imagination, to begin to consider that there may be forces and entities and beings of another nature whose reality differs from our own to a very, very drastic degree. So when we're talking about cosmic horror, we're talking about essentially trying to, or helping to, impart upon the mind a glimpse of reality beyond the ordinary human perception. And for most, that invokes kind of a great terror and fear. Hence cosmic horror.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position.
Whereas for others, it's more of a cosmic truth or fascination or beauty.
Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
It's a small mind, isn't it, that has never considered the potential of such a reality, even just the potential.
So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
You ever think about the point of view of life from, say, an ant? You know, imagine what would a spider be, or a worm, or a caterpillar, or any of the other practically infinite number of creatures that exist. If your perspective of life was that small, and how do you know it isn't? As a human being, we have such grand ideas of what we think is real and true. How do you know you're not just an ant, really, in the grand scheme of what actually exists? How do you know?
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humour. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times his social life was so intensive his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias and resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visible in the background and piles of papers scattered across the floor.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night.
Now they say astronauts, among other people, but astronauts, most often when they first leave the surface of the Earth, and, whether they're operating just beyond the atmosphere of the Earth and they get a sense of the planet and its existence in space and life. So not them, not their own life. Most people, I think, we're so focused on our own existence, aren't we? Me and my own journey and what it means, what my life means. They say astronauts, they get a glimpse into the existence of life beyond themselves, the existence of the planet, hovering, just hanging out in space, alone for all this time. And I think that's kind of a close association to what Lovecraft is trying to lead us towards, this awareness of a great, vast, basically unfathomable life, and it's what it could be, or what it can be, or what it is outside of us, outside of our own tiny little perspective.
Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures.
We often give the word, feelings around this type of thing. We often give it the term existential dread, don't we? As if there's some kind of deeply rooted fear, dread associated with what? Knowing the truth of our existence or hinting at the truth. Often people use that term. They don't really know what they're talking about. It's like a sense that they get, an impression that they get in their mind. Never really often hear of existential delight, do you?
Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
As if the truth might be terrifying and not so delightful. Maybe it just matters how you look at it.
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Dagon, or Dagon, or Dagon, was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's work, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the Deep Ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. It's interesting how you have this, so-called manufactured work or manufactured mythology so closely linked to human thought, human psychology, human belief, as if maybe there's not such a great stretch between such fabrications, like the truth at the heart of the matter. You think about it, and the fact that life can manifest and materialize this type of organism, this type of body to exist in. And then you look at all of the other types of beings and creatures that we know exist and how strange they really, really are. It's really not. Again, you'd have to be pretty small-minded to think that life couldn't, or hasn't, or wouldn't manufacture such things for real. Not to mention all of the sort of paranormal and mystical and unexplained phenomena that we don't need to go into here. But this is the real meaning of what cosmic horror is. And, again, a lot of people write it off as kind of fiction and fabrication, but I don't really know what, but because it is a fabrication. At the end of the day, it's a work, But is it really fiction? And it doesn't try to impress upon you that it's true in any way. You'd have to be mad, wouldn't you, to think that this was true? But do you know that it's not? Do you know that there isn't some kind of twisted, subtle, hint at a deeper... Anyone who's taken any kind of psychedelics or done any kind of deep meditation work or, you know, exploration of consciousness in any way will know I've had some kind of little taste or little insight into something. How they word it, I don't know. And I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. I don't really need to get into it, but, you know, that's what cosmic horror is. It's a way of helping you remember that you are a tiny ant in the face of reality, in the face of cosmos. And the smart thing to do is to not forget that. And in fact, the smart thing to do is remember that often in the face of what we think is life is about. And we give such meaning to meaningless trivialities, don't we? Often as human beings. Anyway, it's my 2 cents.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
We could always talk about the weather, do you know what I mean? August Derleth was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works throughout his company Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works, after his death he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu Mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu Mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. Necronomicon. Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark of the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. Source: Lovecraft Studios, Volume 7, No. 1, H.P. Lovecraft, S.T. Joshi. Okay. The truth is often stranger than fiction. Where's that from? These days the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published it was subject to a wide debate. After the author used it in the story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted in defiance of Dagon that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analogue to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was the only proper choice, and among other things, it was gender-specific, indicating that science was an endeavour to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. Okay. Now what? Not supposed to be a very long game, this.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now, I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
And isn't that funny? I mean, how would you know? Say you come across this book, or you kind of regard what I'm talking to you about today. Would you want to know if it was real? If it was a thing? Would you want to know? And how could you know without seeing it for yourself? How could you really know? But of course then there's no going back, is there? Lovecraft on tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12 in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to, having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favour of prohibition, the prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as of any other. Source: The Spirit of Revision, Lovecraft's Letters to Zelia Brown, Reed Bishop. H.P. Lovecraft, Shauna Branney. Well, maybe he didn't take drugs.
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm.
Hard to say, isn't it?
A mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat, after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
And this is where, you know, people tend to
The end is near.
kind of write it off, you know, as a story, a fictional story, without seeing into the
I hear a noise at the door,
hint.
as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to kind of write this stuff off, isn't it, as fiction, or I don't know, however you'd want to word it. But I do often, as I've said before, you know, put it this way: there are people alive today that you can talk to that are living similar types of experiences to that. Now, whether or not it's real is a different question, but they are experiencing it. You know, humanity, we have a whole wide array of mental health issues, don't we? Some of them ranging from very, very minor to very, very extreme. And, you know, who's to say what is and isn't actually happening when it comes to people having these types of inner experiences of whatever it may be along this line. So anyway, I take this as a reminder, you know, when I watch this stuff, when I read this stuff, when I hear about this stuff, to just, again, to remember don't want to use the term my own insignificance, but the danger of thinking that I know what the hell is going on here in this world and this life, and how the more I look around at human beings and our population and how we seem to think we know what we're doing and how bad a job and how destructive we have become and how insane, clearly. Maybe there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye. Anyway, that was a little bit of fun, something a bit different, and I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know what else is to come. If there's anything, there may be something, maybe not. I'm headed off out into a little bit of Halloween trick-or-treating, and we will be back, if not later, which, thinking about it now, we probably won't be. I'm going to hang out with my kids. Now, we will be back with some Zombieland Conquest tomorrow through the day, and I'll try to get a few episodes out. We're back into the swing of it. It's been a month since we played around with Marcus Aurelius out there. He's got a real mission. Anyway, we won't get into too much of it now. We'll catch up on that tomorrow. As always, thank you for joining me for this strange, weird, and wonderful tale, and I hope you had fun this Halloween. It's been a good sort of little lesson for me. See you in the next one. Goodbye for now.